Today, I'm your host, Tony Butler, and I'm pleased to be joined by Josh O'Rourke, the CTO of ObjectiveHealth, and our very own Damian Adamczyk. It's great to have you with us, guys. Really pleased that you can share your insights with us today. Perhaps we can come to you and you can introduce yourself to our audience. Maybe Josh, we can start with.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you, Tony, for the brief introduction there. So I'm Josh O'Rourke. I am Chief Technology Officer at ObjectiveHealth. ObjectiveHealth is a integrated research organization. And what that means is that we partner with physician practices and we create research centers of excellence within those practices. Today, we're partnered a lot with gastroenterology, dermatology, and urology. And we have somewhere between 30 and 40 sites across the United States. So we actually conduct clinical trials on patients. From a technology perspective, we also have a suite of technology solutions that we use at our own sites, and then that we also offer to our pharmaceutical partners. And those are Objective Screen and Objective View. Objective Screen, I think will be relevant for our discussion today, is our patient recruitment platform that uses artificial intelligence and machine learning to help us identify patients for trials. And you'll hear me talk about that a little bit more as we go through the discussion.
Thanks, Josh. And Damian?
Yeah, thanks for introducing Tony. So I'm Damian. It's a pleasure to be here. Good evening, good afternoon to everyone. It depends on the time zone you are. So in Software Mime, I'm focusing on transforming our partners' ideas into working solutions in general. I'm focusing on transferring the information or the needs between the teams of scientists, between the teams of C-level experts, of C-level people, and to the IT specialist. This is what I do in general.
Great, thanks, Damian. Well, I think we can certainly say we've got the right people on for our webinar today. Really looking forward to getting into things. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we start. If you've got any questions as we go through the webinar, then please feel free to write them in the Ask a Question box that should be on the right-hand side of your screen, and then we'll endeavour to answer them a little later in our webinar. If you see a question that perhaps was your question and someone else has already asked, don't worry, just vote for that question and it will keep it near the top. You'll also notice a number of brief polls that will be running throughout our webinar. Please do take the time to answer these questions, as they really help us in making these sessions as good as they can be, as we understand more about what's important to you. In fact, we've got our first one coming up, and the question there is, what is the primary area that you work in? So we'd really appreciate you giving us your feedback on that. So let's get into our webinar. And guys, perhaps if we think about AI, we think about its evolving role in life sciences and clinical research. How do you think that both AI, ML will shape the way research is conducted over the next few years? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah,
Go ahead, Tony. Sorry. Go ahead.
So let me start. Yeah, I think it really depends on the point that we are looking from. So if we are looking from the organizational level, we think about. I see there is I would say the need from the market that we have to connect different solutions, AI solutions, because at this point we see there is many different pieces of the AI technologies, and we have to combine it, check the results that we obtain by using this technology. This is my idea at this point. Josh?
Yeah, no, I think what you said when you started off there, like it depends on what your vantage point is, right? And so I since we're a site network, I tend to look at things from kind of like the site perspective, not necessarily like the pharma or the CRO perspective. So I would say that I'm looking at it more from a clinical operations, I guess. There are like some really exciting things happening, I think, on the pharma side, like with AlphaFold, that DeepMind, like the protein folding algorithm and things like that are going to aid drug development in the future. And I think those are going to be really, really important, but it's still really early. So that's kind of like the big picture perspective. But then there's kind of like, what's the problem that's like right in front of me right now? Like I kind of tend to focus on those. And so for us, as a research site, a few things where I see AI being implemented a lot, like just today, is just immediate problems that people are having. So for us, right, like, so as a site network, patient recruitment is a really big one. That's something that all sites struggle with, is like recruiting patients for the trials that we're offering. I see a lot of tools for trial design, for example. I see a lot of things around like regulatory submissions. I've been in conversations about like synthetic control arms for trials and digital twins. So just in general, I think things that like will make trials more faster, accelerate clinical trials, make them more predictable, and make them possibly even more, patient specific down the road as we kind of move more towards personalized medicine. So I think, I guess to summarize is, kind of like it's still focused kind of on small problems today, but like I think we're working towards like some of these bigger visions of like what AI will be able to do.
Yeah, Josh, I completely agree, Josh. It's, if you are a scientist, you have to, you want some, to find the solution for some problems. And, you need, I think if we think about the solutions that we need, it depends. So if you are a scientist, you want something that, increase efficiency of your work. If you're on the level of company, you are thinking about the platform that collect all the things that we are doing around, and combine the insight about the effectiveness, about the results, about the problems, about the market also. This is very very difficult to catch the line the market is on the exact point, on some point of, from our perspective and from the market perspective.
Thanks, guys. That's really interesting. Josh, you just made a comment sort of in your opening bit where you used the expression from your vantage point, which is interesting because, as an organization, you are obviously embracing AI, which is great. But how has the perception of AI shifted within clinical research over the past few years? Are we seeing a lot more companies sort of, from a strategic integration, or is there still a lot of ones being cautious and looking at more of just experimenting with it?
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting. I think that we've kind of made this shift from, is AI worth exploring at all, right? Like where it's this thing, it's like people have heard of it. It's like, is this even something I should look into? Does it actually work? I think the answer to that question is yes. I think that, with the recent developments with like large language models and things like that, I think like there's a lot of power there. And so I've seen this shift from like, is it worth exploring, to, okay, well, how do we use it? Like, where is it going to be effective for us? And that's kind of the shift I see happening. From again, my vantage point as a company that is a site network, essentially, I do see AI becoming more integrated in trials. So just to give you a couple of specific examples, I mentioned that we work in gastroenterology. I've seen AI solutions integrated as part of the screening process, where for non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, there's imaging systems that will try to find balloon cells on liver biopsies, for example, so convolutional neural networks. Same thing I've also seen in inflammatory bowel disease, where they'll try to assess the amount of inflammation that a patient has when the patient is being scoped. And those now, while those systems aren't making a determination on the patient, they're still being used to kind of like to refer back to, almost as like a second opinion from a physician. And so I'm seeing more of those being written into the protocols, which is I think really encouraging, because those tools are very, very helpful. And then just one more thing, I think from a regulatory perspective too, at least here in the United States, from the FDA, like I think they're more open to AI-driven solutions now, and they've even provided some guidance on that, whereas before, it was just hard to know.
Sure, I guess those regulatory bodies putting sort of their weight behind, or their agreement behind it, almost, I guess, would settle the market a little in knowing that those regulatory bodies are behind it.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, that's good to know. So great. So, sorry, Damian, did you have anything to say on that?
Yeah.
Oh,
It's huge topic about the regulatory. Yeah. If you look about the regulatory in United States and Europe, it's, we can start from the beginning. So when all the things about AI, appears, Europe starts thinking about what we can do to prevent the wrong uses. But there was no cases to analyze, and it's a very fundamental difference in the Europe and United States, that states working about the solution and looking the things that are wrong, looking about the things that should be fixed and regulated. And and Europe, we start thinking about the regulation before anything is done, anything is made. And it's the reason why there is much easier to work with in AI in United States. And maybe about the general question you give to Tony. So I think that the skepticism is the thing that is still somewhere here in clinical trials. It's difficult, but it's funny, because when we start to adopt the technologies inside and we check what the results are, we start from the evaluating the point of effectiveness of the trials. We start evaluating the effectiveness of for example, the patient recruitment, which is the huge problem for the successive trial. And we observe the results. We got the pure evidence that we should go into this area.
Interesting. So just picking up on that point, Damian, perhaps we can come to you, Josh. I mean, you also mentioned things like LLM, the language models, etc., a little earlier. How are you using NLP to classify patient visits, then identify the opportunity to intervene when perhaps a particular visit is relevant to one of the studies that you want to do?
Yeah, that's a really great question. We use these technologies quite a bit for lots of different reasons. So whether it's just kind of like traditional NLP, like where you're using like term frequency, inverse document frequency, and bag of words approaches and things like that for kind of simple classifications, to more advanced approaches like large language models, for example. So some of the things that we use it for, so because of who we are and because of how our organization is structured, like I said, we partner with physician practices. So we actually integrate with their electronic health record system, meaning we have access to patient electronic health records for the patients that we recruit and screen for our trials. So we'll do things like use named entity recognition for physician notes and pull out terms from those notes. So for example, if a physician puts like myocardial infarction in a note, we'll be able to map that to like an ICD-10 code or a SNOMED code or something like that. We'll use it for PHI detection, protected health information detection, to kind of like clean the data before we use it for anything, to remove any patient identifiers and things like that. Semantic search is another big one. So to go back to the myocardial infarction example, like semantic search just means that you can attribute meaning to text, right? And so like you can kind of like semantically search for a heart attack and still be able to find myocardial infarction. We use that for like feasibility search and things like that. And then the big one is our recommendation system that we use to identify patients for the trials that we run at our sites. And we use sparse autoencoders for that. And we will use kind of pre-processed data from language models as part of those encoders. And that is what helps us match patients to the trials that we run.
Wow, interesting. So have those partnerships that you spoke about, has that enabled you to be more flexible, to I guess experiment in a way with, say, non-standard architectures, or push the boundaries of what's possible, looking at that art of the possible sort of thing? Is that it?
Yeah, no. I mean, a lot of this stuff is really new, right? And so I feel like a lot of what we're doing is, I don't want to say it's non-standard per se, because it's like you're kind of taking like traditional software engineering architectures and you're trying to kind of build them in a way that's useful for AI. Some things that are new would be like, like vector search engines, making sure your data pipelines can efficiently run inference against your models, and you kind of do have to scale those things up. So I think like where, we spend a lot of our time with the amount of data that we work with is scaling up our systems. And then there's just a lot of work that goes into the data engineering. I tell people this all the time, machine learning, AI, it sounds really fun, being able to train models, but the truth is that you spend like 90% of your time like cleaning data and processing data, and trying to get the data to your models in a clean way. And so that's where a lot of our time is spent too, is just on that, is, kind of building up the architecture so that we can efficiently train our models, update our models, and validate our models.
I'm wondering, Josh, in your opinion, because there's many different opinions about the value of the data that are not, prepared for the analytics or not prepared for the AI. And many people say that the value is equal to zero. What do you think? If the value still have to things that you just said, what is the value of the data? Is it negative?
I think that's a question, like really where my mind goes to is just domain knowledge, right? I think like in healthcare specifically, extracting value from the data is going to depend on like what level of domain knowledge you have on the data that you're working with. For example, like with the data sets we work with, I mean, there's lots of like, medication codes and diagnosis codes and all kinds of different things. And if you just look at it, like it doesn't necessarily tell the story of a patient, but when you start to kind of like map things out into patient journeys, they do tell a story, and you can see things and you can infer things from that data. So I think data cleaning, data engineering partnered with domain knowledge is probably like the most important thing, and it's a big differentiator for us, I think.
Yeah, exactly. This is what we do in SoftwareMind. So we see that to provide the really working solutions, the domain knowledge is it's needed. It has to be there to, starting from the beginning, when we start cooperating with a new company, when you thinking about the partnerships, we see that it's necessary to check the idea of the, let's say we work with a startup. So we, if we think about the idea, we have to check what kind of perspective do we have, because we put amount of our work to find the people, to find the right people, to manage the, maybe some scientists, maybe field experts to work into this project. But, if the general idea behind that, if the market is not good for these solutions, we put amount of efforts, but finally after a few months, it collapsed. So we also have to understand what's going on in case of the solutions, and we also, by that, we provide the right architecture, which is what Tony said. So I think that also the biggest advantage of SoftwareMind is we taking different pieces of the solutions, different pieces of the technologies that are on the market. We are able to use different models, able to use different data sources, different work on these data sources, and create the solutions that have the impact on the end. That is very, let's say, focus on the single problem of the solution. This is what we do.
Thanks, Damian. I just want to pick up on something you've mentioned, and maybe we'll come to Josh. He might be able to answer this for us. So you've spoken about using, I guess, experts in this. I mean, I think you mentioned field experts, trial coordinators, clinicians, etc. How early do you involve them in the development cycle when you're looking to shape AI tools? Because I guess in that patient journey, they have a big role to play. So how early do you get those ones involved?
Yeah, it's you ask me, Josh, Tony?
Well, either of you.
Yeah, I think it's necessary from the very beginning to involve all the people that might have the impact for the solution. So if this is the clinician, they have to be involved. If we're working about the solutions that have to be from the very beginning, have to be created from the very beginning. We have to understand all the people that will be using that. Is it clinical site? Is it sponsor? Is it hospitals? Whatever. They have to be involved. If we creating something from the scratch, if we trying to develop working solutions, it's good to ask, because we working on the platform that the different view is for the different users. So for this different view, we have to provide the understanding. We have to understand what is needed. So for example, if you work with the doctors, we know that there is not good to put too many buttons, too many things that they can change, because that will have the wrong impact for the whole system. They have to make the workflow from very clarify workflow from the beginning to put the data to get the results out. That it cannot be complicated too much.
Sure. And I guess getting them involved as early as possible then helps with them adopting it, I guess.
Yeah.
Which is we see. So, okay, thanks for that. This just leads us to our second poll question for our audience, where, in your view, which clinical area could benefit most from AI in the next 2 years? So we look forward to getting your feedback on that question. So just looking at sort of applying AI in clinical research, Josh, can you share how ObjectiveHealth is using machine learning to identify patients for research opportunities? How do you do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned during my introduction a platform that we've built called Objective Screen that we use internally at our own sites, and that we offer also to external sites as well that are not part of our network. So that is really our patient recruitment platform, and we have really built it around machine learning. We got our start in gastroenterology and in a disease called non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, or NASH for short. And it's this disease where your liver accumulates fat and it starts to stiffen over time. I know it'll probably be, I think last time I looked, it'll be the #1 cause of liver transplants in 2030. But those patients are notoriously difficult to find because up until recently, there was no treatment on the market, and the NASH is often called a silent chronic condition, meaning a lot of people have it, but they don't know that they have it because they're asymptomatic. And so even though we were integrated with electronic health record systems, the problem that we had was how do we find these patients if they're not diagnosed? And that led us to machine learning as a solution. So what we did was we started building risk models for patients based on their medical records. So diagnosis history, biomarker history, medication history, all these different things. And we found out that we actually were, able to reasonably well identify these patients just based on their risk. So that was kind of step one. That was really the first AI problem that we started on, and we branched out into other diseases from there with risk stratification. But today it's become, quite a bit more sophisticated. I mentioned earlier, using these like sparse autoencoders and building actual recommendation systems. So we've built a process in Objective Screen where we have kind of humans in the loop. And so as patients are being recruited, they get pre-screened, they get chart reviewed, and then they ultimately screen for a study. Each one of those steps is like a validation point for us. And we use those steps to go back and update our models so that we can make better recommendations for patients. So our system is actually online and learning in real time so that we can identify patients for these trials. And it's not just like one machine learning solution. It's kind of like a mix of different technologies that we're putting together to make this work. But it's been really effective for us.
Awesome. So I guess that really helps you to balance that strike between automation and you mentioned obviously human in the loop validation. Do you find that that's sort of quite balanced then? Yeah,
I think like with human in the loop validation, it's kind of like a question of risk, right? Like if you're working on a solution and it's kind of like the outcome or whatever is low risk, I think you can kind of lean more towards more automation versus like, with us, like patient safety is involved, right? And so like you want to make sure that even though you have these automated systems in place, AI, that are recommending patients for trials, that it's still being looked at by a human because we care about patient safety. And so I think I kind of look at it at that spectrum as like where things are low risk, I'll lean kind of more automated, but like, where it's high risk, patient safety is involved, like we're always going to want like a human in the loop for sure.
Yeah, I really support your perspective, Josh. In fact, yeah, but I think it's more like a patient in the loop and doctor in the loop. But we also should think about the human in the loop, but as a quality control, as someone who is kind of management role of the outcome that we have, because we probably that there will be situation that these systems that already works, there will be less human in the loop in the future, because they will develop, they will be better. We have to, they qualify the results, check them, and yeah, I think that some kind of situation from my life that really respond to situations. So where I was, I think 10-12 years ago, I fly first time in the plane from the Europe to the United States. I go into the plane, there was a huge one, and I start thinking where the parachutes are. It's like hundreds of people there, and nobody used them. This is how the process is good enough that we are not thinking about the parachutes, about this kind of extra safety level. Because the checking the plane itself and the whole the ecosystem works, prevent to situations like the crash. And it was very difficult to me, because it was risky to ask about where the parachutes are to the way that the woman from the plane. So I was thinking a lot, but it was difficult to ask. It was kind of dangerous to ask about that and have the extra control in the United States when I land the country.
Yeah, I think trust is a big issue here, and I think like the parachute example that you gave, I think is a really good one actually, because you can think of an automobile or anything else. Like those technologies have been around for a long time. They've been proven. We trust them. You trust on a parachute when you pull the ripcord that it's going to open, right? And they've been safety tested and all kinds of other things. With AI, I think we're still very much in the early stages, right? We're still even figuring out like how to explain like how they work, and like I know there's like this whole field that's kind of being created on mechanistic interpretability, like understanding like how these large language models are making the decisions that they're making and those types of things. So I think like we'll build that trust over time as we understand how they work more, but like until we get there, I think like we'll still have to have like humans in the loop for sure, at least for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I think that's a real key takeaway for our audience, because there is still so much, I guess, sort of unknowns about AI, and a lot of people are going, oh, this AI stuff's going to take over and there'll be no sort of human interaction, etc. But I think we are seeing, well, actually there's room for both. And I think that human in the loop, probably particularly within, when we're dealing direct with people, will always be needed. So I think it's a key takeaway, one of the key takeaways of how you actually manage the balance between sort of AI and that human in the loop. So yeah, I'm pleased that we've brought that up, because it's a key thing. So just thinking about, with most advanced technologies, there's challenges, and AI implementation is not, would certainly sort of fit into that. So I was just sort of thinking about it in a webinar on AI in general that we did a few months back. And one of the things that was highlighted was that if organizations don't get on board with AI, they're going to get left behind. That was sort of one of the key statements that came out. And that type of thing is making many CEOs just, send out a brief to the management team, get some of this AI stuff. And there's no real direction of what does that actually mean. So for Josh, how important is it for you, for your team, to be able to collaborate quickly and clearly on ideas? I know you've been, you're working with Damian, etc. How has that partnership really enabled that collaboration and getting to the real crux of what is important to your organization?
Yeah, no, I think this is a great question, and I think it touches kind of on like a couple things we've talked about already, and I think just to touch really quickly on one thing that you said is, people that aren't using AI will get left behind. I think that's probably true. I can think of a book just for the audience. There's a great book by Tyler Cowen, an economist here in the U.S. called Average is Over, and he kind of talks about this. This was before large language models and that kind of stuff, but he does kind of talk about it, and it's really good, very much worth reading. But he kind of talks about this of like, being average is over, like that we're going to have to embrace automation, and there's kind of going to be these like haves and have-nots, I think, and there's going to be people that are left behind, the people that don't embrace it. And so I think that's true. I will say though that I want to caveat that with, I don't think like just because AI is out there, we should just rush and adopt it just for every single problem. Like, I think it's very much still like the right tool for the job type of problem. And that's where, Damian mentioned earlier, bringing in people as early as possible to figure out like, how are we going to use this? I think one of the questions I would ask is like, is AI the right solution for this particular problem? Like we've come up with that even in our own organization, where it's like, our CEO or somebody will want to use AI to solve something. And it's like, okay, well, we can solve that with like a statistical model or something much, much simpler, that's much more predictable. And, will save us if we can do much faster. So I think that's where that expertise comes in, that where Damian's team is really helpful, is bringing that, helping us kind of work through those questions of, is this the right solution? Is this something that, we want to use AI for? Okay, if it is, then how would we do it? Like, how would we build a system like this? And so that's kind of where we've worked together really, really closely. As far as platform goes, we do a lot of our data processing and data work in Databricks. And it's been really great to work with the Software Mind team on that specifically. Just because like they bring a lot of talent there, and have really helped us scale from a data processing side.
Great.
Yeah, I can really also say, you said about average is over. I remember myself like a few years ago when I was, I was doing the thing that I should do, but I'm taking that into this point now, and I see myself, I'm able to do 80% more thanks to using the tools that already created, or we co-created in Software Mind, because we also create the own solutions for our internal purposes. But for example, I'm expert field in the bioengineering, in the biotechnology, and clinical also. And also one of the things that really consume my time is understand the market. If some startups, for example, came to us and want to work on the idea that they have, it's good to understand how the impactful their solution is, and this is what we do. And thanks to the AI, I'm able to check the market, check the tons of data much easier.
Great, thanks, Damian. I think again, this is another key takeaway for our audience, is that AI isn't the fix for everything. It's great, it has its place, but I guess that very, spend some time to really define what it is that you're trying to do, and analyzing whether AI is the best solution for that. I think that's sort of what I'm hearing from both of you, is to really put some time in that, and I guess collaborating with the right people, helping to really sort of get clarity on those ideas, rather than just thinking, yep, let's automate absolutely everything with AI. So yeah, again, another key takeaway for our audience. Thanks guys on that. So that brings us to our third and final poll question for our audience, which we'd like your feedback on. What would be the most helpful for you as the next step after this webinar? We'd look forward to your comments on that. So I guess just looking at perhaps sort of the AI adoption best practices as we look at things moving forward, are there specific areas where you think that maybe agentic solutions could have a real impact? What do you think, Josh?
Yeah. I think this is a really interesting topic. This is a really big topic in AI and machine learning right now. So when you say agentic solutions, what you mean is taking these large language models and giving them the ability to use tools.
Mm-hmm.
In a previous company I worked at, we did a lot of work with robotic process automation, which is where you have like a system like Pega or UiPath, and it's kind of like sitting on the computer, and it's doing like key logging and things like that, and it's watching someone work, and then it might copy data from one system and kind of paste it into this other system, again using the tools that like the user has access to, so the mouse and the keyboard and those kind of things. So when I think about like agentic solutions, like that's immediately where my mind goes to. So one of the problems with robotic process automation as it stood, a couple of years ago, was that the systems were really rigid and brittle, in my opinion. We did a lot of projects where we tried to implement those, and it's kind of like, if the name of the field changes or whatever, like it could break the whole thing. And then you stop processing data. And so there's like a lot of maintenance and things like that. One of the things with large language models is they're somewhat intelligent, at least, right? And so it gives you the ability to make the systems kind of more dynamic and maybe even semi-autonomous in a sense. But the trade-off is that you lose some of that, I guess, like the guarantee of the outcome, right? Because like, language models hallucinate and those types of things. So I think they are going to have an impact. Some of the areas where we're looking at using them, again, like my mind goes to robotic process automation. So it's just improving our coordinators' workflows at the sites. I mean, these coordinators, when they work on a clinical trial, they have like 6 different systems that they have to work in. There's a lot of duplicate data entry. And so like my mind goes to is like, can we use these more agentic solutions to clean data, submit data, and just make our coordinators more efficient in what they're doing. Other areas I know like between us and pharma, there's, once we submit data to pharma, they might send queries back to us and we might have to clean data and correct it in the EDC system. And so just solutions around that, I think would be really, really useful too. So those are just, what comes to my mind immediately.
Okay. Thanks for that. What about you, Damian? You got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's at some okay. So from the perspective of user, like the personal user, for sure there is the huge possibilities, like pay the bills, like order the food, and you don't have to think about that. You can live with your family. You can focus on other stuff, on other things. From the perspective of company, for me, having couple additionals, Damian, that do the things that I should do, but when I sleep, for example, because everyone have to sleep, will be very useful to check the projects that are that are on the way, but there is maybe something change on the market that will be good to think about. Maybe the additional data source appear, maybe the other possibilities around the projects, because we creating innovative things. And very often we cannot, be on the right level of understanding the market for each product that we have. And what I said before, it's very necessary. It's very important to understand the market all the time, because in case of AI, the things change so fast. For example, I'm very surprised by, for example, going to the conferences when I hear about the C levels that explain the technology that they create. At the same time, there's like half year later, I see the papers from many different sources, like the scientific papers. I think there's like half year, maybe 4 months, kind of shift between the sites, and yeah, because the AI changing so fast. So in case of architecture, for example, when you read the papers from Harvard, I think they publishing every month, they publishing sound data about the new possibilities of create architecture. For example, I really encourage you to read these papers.
Interesting, thank you. I just sort of been thinking, sort of as you've been talking, sort of both of you, and sort of thinking about sort of perhaps some in our audience are sort of at the beginning of their AI journey. And as you just mentioned, Damian, there is so much out there. There's so much more being added. It could be a little bit overwhelming of going, well, where do I start? What do I start with? So can you perhaps share just your thoughts, your insights in, if I'm looking to decide between building proprietary AI versus perhaps adopting market solutions, could you give any insight into, like, how would you decide? What's your criteria for deciding? Do we go with something off the shelf and maybe sort of tweak it a bit, or do we, how do you decide to go for proprietary or off the shelf?
You want to start, Josh, and I will comment it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a fan of starting small, and I've mentioned this before when this question comes up. Especially with AI, I think it's easy to see it and to have these like really big ideas, but there's always kind of like these edge cases that you just don't expect. And before you go and spend a lot of resources like trying to solve the world, it's probably best just to kind of take a few steps back and start smaller with a smaller problem, and then start kind of building around that like iteratively. And that's what we did with Objective Screen. Really, if you think back to what I was saying a moment ago about Objective Screen, we really started with just one risk model for one indication for NASH, and then we ended up just kind of like, we saw that it worked, and we kind of kept building on it iteratively until we came up with this recommendation system to match patients to any trial. And then we're taking human feedback in the loop and all these different things. That's really, really cool. But like we didn't start there. We didn't know that it was going to work when we first started. And so again, like before you make a lot of investment, kind of pick a smaller problem, start with that, get some traction, get some buy-in from your leadership team, whatever stakeholders you're working with, and then kind of start building up from there. Would be my recommendation.
Yeah, I think it's a perfect idea to start with something like MVP. This is what we do. This is what you do with your team, and based on the experience you got, you can create a new projects. You can create new products, but you already you start from the completely different level. You have something that can give you something insightful for the next project. And I think it's very risky to start with the huge solutions that give you all the things that you need, not creating the this is what we do. We create pieces of your solutions, and it's difficult to it's, if you take something from the big piece of software that give you the barrier for the future, for example, it's possible. You have to collect the different sources of different vendors, different options from the outside, from the market, to create something really, really useful.
Thanks, guys. That's been really interesting and insightful. I'm sure our audience has got lots of points to take away from all of your comments. We'll just we've got a number of questions that have come through, so perhaps we can just go to our QA. We've got 3 I can see questions, so let's start with, I think our first one that came through. It's from Trev. Thanks for your question, Trev. As 80% of trials are late, is anyone using AI to help flex staff from underperforming trials to overperforming ones to keep costs down? Well, how would you answer that one?
So I can speak from our perspective. So it's something we've thought about, but it's not something that we're currently doing. So you are right, though, that statistic that 80% of trials are late is 100% the truth. Most of the trials that we work on, they get recruitment windows get extended, or whatever, because they haven't found the patients in time, or it was more difficult to enroll, or things like that. So yeah, I mean, it's a big challenge for sure, but I haven't seen any solutions out there that use AI to do that today. But I think it would be worth exploring for sure.
I guess naturally we're just going to see the adoption of AI is going to improve those numbers. Wouldn't you?
Well, that's what we're trying to argue at ObjectiveHealth, right? Like that's what we say with Objective Screen, is that like our recruitment platform accelerates trials, right? Sure. So we recruit faster, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, I think to go into the Trev question, so we have to really think what is the reason that situation. So for sure, like 50% of the trials are late because of the patients. I think that the 50, this is the correct value. 50% of the trials that are late, the reason is because the patients. Yeah, we have to focus on the support the patients, support the finding the patients. Yeah, and understand the other issues during the whole process. It's 10 or more years, so a lot of things may appear during that. We also start focusing on the rare disease. It's also, yeah, the situation to finding the patients is even more difficult. So we have to really take the scope for the whole picture of I think even single clinical trial might have different situation than other one. If they're even the close ones, the situation might change dramatically.
Mm. Yeah. Thanks guys. Good question, Trev. So we've got a question from Jose. I think we've sort of partly covered this, but what is the level of confidence the clinical industry has to AI tools and results in clinical trial results?
So I would say, again, go back to the examples I shared with the trials that we worked on that were using neural nets to inspect images from ultrasounds for biopsies or scopes. I've seen that a lot, actually, on several different inflammatory bowel disease trials, several different trials for non-alcoholic steatohepatitis. Like those technologies are becoming very, very common. Now, in terms of how confident that the sponsors are with those tools, I have so basically, like, they're still kind of in like the validation phase, I would say. Those tools, even though they're being used and they're written into the protocols to use those tools, they're still not actually making the determination for the patient. Like, they're kind of used as like a second opinion from the provider themselves. And so I don't know if that's possibly to collect more training data, if that's to do more validation. So they are written into the protocols, but there's still not the level of confidence of like, yes, we're going to use this 100% of the time, and it's going to, make the determination of whether or not the patient is going to enroll in the trial. So like I said before, like, I still think there's kind of that trust that's being built there. And I think it's going to take some time before we get there.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for your question, Jose, on that. And then we've got a question from Alvaro. I hope I pronounced that name right. And it says, what challenges and which skills will be most important in a team implementing AI solutions? And how can we build them quickly if they are lacking? On the other hand, what are the biggest challenges for a research team to use AI? Well, big questions there.
Yeah, so let me start. The landscape is, I would say, complicated. So we have to really collect the people, because I cannot imagine that a single person will be able to create working solution with a good perspective by himself, herself. I think it's not possible at this point. Example, I don't remember how last time there was a single person that obtained Nobel grants. There's always a team of the people. So if you're thinking about making your solution that work in the future, you have to find other people that will support you. For example, if you build startup, the most successful startups having 3 founders, and always there are different skills that combine each other and making the full range of skills that give you results.
Okay.
Yeah, I can add on to that a little bit, and I can talk even a little bit about how our teams are structured and how we're able to do what we do. I think we talked about domain knowledge. I think domain knowledge, specifically in healthcare, specifically in clinical research, is just key. Like, I can't imagine having a team of software engineers that come from outside of healthcare and trying to build the solutions that we're trying to build without having that someone with that domain knowledge on the team, or that kind of experience in healthcare and research. And luckily we have that. Our team is very senior. I don't think there's anybody on our team that has less than 10 years of experience. So lots of expertise, lots of people that have been in software engineering for a long time. And then, kind of to Damian's point, I mean, there's just like, with operationalizing AI models, there's a lot of moving pieces. So you've got, data engineering, and then you've got like your presentation layer, whether that's like a web app or an analytics platform or whatever. And then, there's training the models, there's running inference against the models, there's scaling the system depending on how many users you have. And there's a lot that goes into that. So I think like, again, depending on what problem you're trying to solve, that's going to dictate kind of what your team needs to look like. But you're probably going to need, like, you're not just going to be able to get like an AI engineer or a machine learning engineer. Like, you're probably going to need like different types of people that have expertise in different areas, because like, again, it's you're building a system that touches a lot of different things.
Yeah, interesting. So I just got one, just in line with that. It's just made me think of something that I just sort of would be worth sort of mentioning, I guess, is that, perhaps in our audience, there are, one or two or a few which have not yet adopted AI within their organization. But they're on, we're pleased to have them here, but they may be thinking, where do I start? We haven't got anything.
Yeah.
What's my first step?
I think that
what advice would you give of where to start?
Yeah, I think each company have some problems that maybe, we start with the problem that we want to solve and understand them better. Is it something related to it might be clinical trials, but it also may be something more organization one. Understand the problem, find the solution, collect the people that we are, keep them in the one place and think about what will be the best that we can do. I think that the huge problem is it was on the beginning when AI start changing everything. There was like a bunch of money, and we try to put the money in the pit. And now there's many organizations that have dozens of AI solutions that are not very effective and are not giving the answer what the impact was. So I think 70% will be thinking about the right strategy, thinking about the solutions, and 30% will be doing the things.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I think my perspective on that is there's like a lot of low hanging fruit out there. I think like this, if you want to get into AI and machine learning, like it's an amazing time. Like I see people sometimes like thinking like, hey, am I too late? And it's like, no, it's like we're still like in the first inning of this. You know what I mean? This I think this is gonna, this trend is gonna continue for a while, and I think there's going to be some really cool stuff happen that we probably haven't even imagined yet. But with that said, I think one place to start is again, simple problems. I mean, even look at more classical machine learning techniques, like just supervised learning on tabular data. You don't necessarily need like a huge amount of data to have effective solutions. And again, that's what we did with our risk models. I mean, we just trained gradient boosted models using data that we had from medical records, and it turned out to be pretty effective. And so there's, I think, because it's so early, there's still just a lot of these really small opportunities where it's like you can kind of start building a foundation for, a larger solution or something more powerful. And so I would just kind of start there, maybe with more traditional machine learning techniques, and explore it, and kind of use that to kind of like start your journey, I think.
Yeah, I think that's really insightful. Sorry, Damian.
Yeah, I think, exactly. And going to the like personal use, we read a lot of times that AI can do something, but in fact, it really depends on the approach that you do. For example, if you put the prompt like just like that, it probably not give you the results that you're looking for. But if you do this in right way, if you give the right questions, if you put the data, for example, if you make the workflow for the AI process itself, it can give you completely different results. Even single word can give you completely different results, and even the same prompt, when you put it in the same environment, give you different results, in different in other repeats. So yeah, you have to be conscious about the whole ecosystem, I would say.
Yeah, so that's really good, and I think what you're saying is start with something small, prove the model, And then I guess further adoption of that within the organization will become easier. Don't start by trying to boil the ocean, as the saying is.
For sure.
Guys, I think that just about brings an end to our Q&A section. In fact, the webinar today. And just for our audience, part of the webinar that you've missed or you want to watch again, then it will be available in about a week or so to watch. So it just leaves me to thank you, Josh, and you, Damian, for sharing your knowledge and experience in what has been a very interesting topic. So just to sum up, what can we take away from this session? Well, using AI to transform clinical trials, it may not be easy, but to be successful, it involves culture, cohesion of a team is absolutely critical, and start with something small. We know it's a fast moving and changing market. Innovation is absolutely key. And we saw how things like AI are already impacting that part of clinical trials. So thank you, Josh and Damian, for your insights. To our audience, if you've got any questions that are specific to you or to your organization on this topic, then please do feel free to reach out to us and connecting with us on LinkedIn. So as always, thank you to the team behind the scenes for running the webinar for us. But most of all, we'd certainly just like to thank you, our audience, for joining us here today. We hope that the webinar has been insightful, and we look forward to seeing you again on our next Software Mind webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.